It is said that one's net worth is directly related to his or hers personal network. The whole purpose behind Security Pro Insights is to create a virtual network where we security professionals can connect and learn from each other on the go while maintaining the many responsibilities of our busy schedules. There is not a person I know who does not agree with the statement, your personal network is one of the most valuable pieces to business success. However, sometimes implementing what we know and building a personal network is hard work. Well, today's guest, Patrick Burns, is an expert at building personal networks within the industry. In this episode, Patrick shares his thoughts and tactics with us so we can build stronger personal networks as well. Patrick Burns is the Vice President of Loss Prevention for the rapidly growing Bob's Discount Furniture. Although well versed in all areas of security and loss prevention, his real expertise lies in bringing the right people together and always learning from his peers. In fact, our introduction came through a shared contact within our personal networks. Patrick, I want to thank you for joining us today and spending some time with all of us. Could you tell us a little more about yourself?
Sure. Thank you. I've been involved in retail loss prevention since 1984. It's something that I actually fell into and didn't know anything about. And at the time, I was a junior in college, taking a degree in criminal justice administration back in the day. And I was working part time as an auxiliary state trooper for the state of Connecticut. It was a volunteer position that I was interested in doing, hoping that I could get onto the force as a regular trooper upon graduation. And I was also working part time for a private investigator. And I fell into a retail loss prevention job in a department store called Filene's Department Stores. They're no longer in business. They've been acquired by what is now Macy's today. And one of the things and one of the reasons I wanted to become a police officer, particularly a state trooper, is I wanted the ability to travel not just within a town, but hopefully, throughout the state. And I also was very interested in not so much road patrol, but in doing investigations that particularly crossed over multiple jurisdictions. And my eyes really opened, starting out as a store detective, and one of my first cases or apprehensions was just not a straight, pure shoplifting apprehension, but an apprehension that involved an employee handing out several $100s worth of merchandise. So I ended up with an apprehension of 3 individuals, 1 employee, and 2 individuals that walked out the door with several $100s worth of Polo Ralph Lauren merchandise, which was attractive at the time, and only being rung up for a pair of socks. And it was just a great experience. And I realized then, what an opportunity for the business, because not only is it an external problem with shoplifting, but it's also an internal problem. And then digging into, well, how many times had this happened before? What are truly the losses that the business has suffered? So I guess I could say I was just sort of hooked at that point.
Just kind of curious, you said that you fell into this role in college, and from what I understand, you really had no idea what you were getting into at the time. I know that we have several listeners that are of that university level. They're going for their degree most of the time in criminal justice. Most of my connections within this industry, I would say we fell into it in some way. What would you tell that person, though, that is in college right now trying to figure out what life looks like, and maybe they only think there's one or two things they can do? What would you tell them about the industry if you had that opportunity?
Well, as you probably know, I believe that the industry is very large today, and depending on what type of organization you're with, are the diversity of the positions within a loss prevention department. And not all of us call it loss prevention. Some of us call it asset protection or profit protection is the new term that is used today. But we're really sort of the auditors, the teachers, and the police to minimize the losses on the business overall. But there's some organizations that are so large today that there's some organizations that actually have forensic departments, and not just someone that goes out there and makes apprehensions on the selling floor. Or there may be data analysts that are studying data that go through and look for trends that might identify some losses, whether it be in a shipping and receiving area or through a POS system, the point of sale system.
So, would you say that there are some roles within this industry then that are more related to the technology side of things and even a physical aspect of it, meaning you don't necessarily even have to deal with the people too often?
Correct. I know a lot of departments today also have an operations loss prevention person, which typically part of their role is to take care of the physical security systems of the facilities, which may include the burglar, the fire alarm, the card access system, the video surveillance system, which many today are network backed through the company's organization of the network and storing and retrieval of that information. And, a lot of that today requires uh, some expertise in the IT world as well as in the LP world.
For sure. So, if I'm an introvert, there's an opportunity for me within this industry as well.
Yes, absolutely. If you're an introvert, you may not be, the best person to sit down and do an interview and obtain an admission gracefully from someone that has violated company policy or has stolen or created losses. But there's other opportunities within the department for some of these, I guess, for lack of a better term, behind the scenes types of things that are so critical and so crucial.
Well, Patrick, I think this segues into what we're ultimately planning to talk about today, and that's the fact that we need additional people in our life to have the greatest level of success. And so you and I actually came to know each other through another security manager that we both know, Mike Case, who actually happened to be the very first episode of Security Pro Insights. Mike Case is the one that put us together. And so you and I both understand the importance of networking. I also heard you say with these data driven analytical individuals, even though they may be a little more on the introverted side, we all need to come together in order to have the greatest experience and the greatest success in life. Would you agree that networking is one of the most critical parts of your success?
Oh, absolutely. From the days of, being a store detective that walked the floor to apprehend shoplifters, sometimes they may just leave without getting anything from my store and go down to the other anchor store at the other end of the mall and attempt to shoplift from there. So it wasn't uncommon for me to walk down into those other stores or pick up the phone and call my counterparts and let them know that I just had some observations in my store and what type of products that they were going after. I think one of the things that I find that's unique in retail is loss prevention, generally speaking, is one of those departments that always crosses over the brand line. We don't mind talking to the competition as far as our competition in business and sales. But we look at our value is we're all fighting the same thing. We're fighting the people that are trying to take advantage of our stores and our systems and create a gain for themselves. So, and I have continued to do that. From the time I was a store detective, I always made sure that I knew who mall security was. I knew who was on what shift. So if I had a problem, if I was working by myself back in the day, I knew who the other store detectives and the other LP managers were in the other bigger anchor stores. And then, as I progressed through my career, whether I became the manager and then a regional to a director and a VP, to always reach out to people and attend a number of different organization and networking events to connect with those people. It's one of the, you mentioned how we got together with Mike Case. Mike Case, I had reached out when I came to this current vertical of retail that I'm in. And, I just did some searching, look on LinkedIn, looking for some of my counterparts that might be out there in this vertical. And there's actually not a lot of us yet today. And I happened to reach out to Mike through LinkedIn, and we had a couple, messages back and forth. But it took some time for us to get together just because of priorities and distances. But we did finally get together and, discuss, our businesses and some of the challenges that we have. You may not always learn something new or something different, but a lot of times talking to another colleague, another peer and professional, it may validate what you're doing as well.
Absolutely. And I was just going to tell everyone that you're giving this information right now, but you are a man of your word. You are backing every bit of it up. And although you just beat me to the punch, that's exactly how the three of us, you, myself, and Mike, have come together. It was you that reached out to Mike. Mike and I already had relationship, but I admired you when I heard the story from Mike about how you reached out to him across competitive lines. Not only are you in the same vertical of retail, you went to the exact same interest. You sell the same exact items, and you realize the benefit of working together. And I admire that of you.
Thank you.
Now, with that being said, there's many people that are listening right now, and they want to know how to become a better networker. How can we become more like you? Maybe someone is new in their role, and they're trying to figure this whole gig out. Maybe there's someone who is just a little bit on the shy side, and they know they want to improve in this, but they're struggling. Can we talk about a few best practices when it comes to personal networking?
Sure. I can tell you initially, I think a lot of us in the role of loss prevention have a little bit of an ego, a little bit of an arrogance, and we think we know it all. But I think as we grow up and progress a little bit, we start to, break down those barriers, particularly when we have our first couple of experiences of networking. Back to the description I gave you, or knowing who the other store detectives were, or who mall security was, starting out as a store detective, to today, knowing the person that's at my same level of VP or director at another similar retailer similar to the one that I'm employed with today. But as far as some of the best practices, just reaching out to people within your vertical, reaching out to people outside of your vertical that may be in retail but not selling your products. One of the big things today is the last couple of years has been a lot of focus on ORC, or organized retail crime. And I can tell you in the vertical that I'm in, we don't have a shoplifting issue at all, because essentially our products are our stores are display case, and everything is not in stock in the store, but it's shipped from a distribution center to a customer's home. So we don't even talk about shoplifting at my current employer, but I still go to these networking events where they're sharing, the main thrust or topic of the event is to share, what's happening in the world of ORC and who are these shoplifters or mules that are being used to go into each one of the stores and grab as much as they can and then facilitate it to a fence so it's sold online later. Well, I could be there for a variety of reasons. I might learn something a little bit differently because they start to talk about, the methods that some of these people are using, and they might lead to a conversation related to fire exits, I believe became common a few years ago, where a lot of these ORC shoplifters, instead of going out the front door with a basket full or a bag full, they were started going out fire exits. And then the conversation got away from shoplifting, but talking about different things you can do with the hardware of that door to still be within fire code and egress and be able to get people out safely, but also slowing down the shoplifter enough that they weren't able to get out there quickly or that it would alert the video surveillance system to record what was happening so you could follow up. I also think, whatever stores where you have markets that there's a lot of theft, visiting the local law enforcement agencies and letting them know your concerns and your problems. A lot of times they don't have the resources to address that for you, but I think they enjoy hearing, okay, here's so and so from company ABC that explaining to me exactly, what is happening. So it may get down to the local patrolman or detective. So when you do pick up the phone and you start to relay a problem or an issue, that patrolman might be on a patrol one night, and maybe you've had several stores in a city that have been burglarized, and they might think twice about just driving by the front of that store, and they might make a loop around the back of the store and look at the lighting and making sure that the doors are all closed and everything looks on the up and up. But if we don't get out there and talk to people and let them know some of our challenges, how can they help us?
Let me ask a quick question on that. In some ways, it may sound a bit manipulative, but I always go back to what is your intent. Did I understand correctly when you were talking about visiting with your local law enforcement, creating those relationships, creating those bonds, that just in building that naturally they tend to want to take a little better care of you as well? So is that why they would go around back and maybe take an extra look? Because now all of a sudden they have a relationship with the person representing that store, or did I misunderstand that?
I think part of it is the relationship, but now they also have the knowledge that this particular brand of retail is having a particular problem. And maybe they've had a lot of burglaries or whatever the case may be in neighboring cities. So my city could be next. And what a great opportunity to stop a theft or maybe even actually apprehend the individuals when they come into my town as a police officer, and I had the knowledge that this particular brand is having a problem. So why don't I take a drive by the back of the store?
Absolutely. I would tell everyone that relationship matters, and whether we like it or not, and again, we still always have to monitor our intentions. But I've come to learn that when we're nice to people, when we take time to show interest in their jobs and not just say, well, I need this from you, but we kind of put ourselves out there and we help them as well, that we as individuals naturally just want to take care of that other person a little more. And just kind of reminding the listeners that you attract more, what do they say, attract more bees with honey than vinegar. Always
Right,
monitoring how we react with others and just being nice and kind will go a long way.
right. I can give you another example. It's fairly a recent one. My company is looking to expand out in the Los Angeles market where we don't have a presence today at all. So our brand out there in our stores is going to be brand new. None of the customer base has experienced us. I have had the fortune to work in the market before, so I have some, I'm pretty familiar with it, but I'm not an expert by any means. And I happened to visit one of the sites that our real estate department was looking at, close to signing a deal, and I just wanted to get a sense of what the building in the area was like. And the current tenant, it was going out of business sale. And while I was walking the floor, I happened to see a police officer from the local town that was buying a few things, and before they closed up, and I waited outside for him. And when he came out, I introduced myself, explained to him that we were looking to possibly come into this town, and had a nice chat with him about the town and learning a little bit more, getting some insight about the types of crimes and the incidents that they're having, but also finding out, what could we do to help them understand our brand and what our intentions are when we come into the area.
It's amazing what you'll learn when sometimes you just ask the question.
Right.
Patrick, I want to jump back just a little bit. You were talking about reaching out to others within your vertical, and we already talked about how you are so good at that. Outside of, some of the networking events that I may or may not know about, what are some other ways that you actually find these individuals and contact these individuals?
I guess there's a variety of ways, but one of the things that comes to my head quickly is sometimes getting involved in something within the business where they may not have a loss prevention department, or it may be, let's say, for example, a vendor, and that vendor has an event with a number of their clients, so that helps you connect with those other clients. But also, I find in this industry that a lot of times our vendors that we rely on within the loss prevention field have people that have actually worked within the industry as well. And so there's some great resources and some great knowledge base there based on their experiences.
Well, you brought up the wonderful vendor word, and I have been in that position to be a vendor myself, and I know that I personally take my role as a vendor very seriously. The way I look at myself and the way I try to conduct business is as someone who is helping someone else find a solution to a real need. And it's all about that relationship. It's all about trust. It's all about learning about, again, the needs and coming up with solutions together. On the flip to that, I run across people that the moment they hear where I'm from, they shut down because of bad experiences with vendors. So, what do you tell that person? I know you've already said that vendors are important. How do you go about, I guess, exploring if a vendor is beneficial to you or someone you want to speak with, or how do you make those decisions? Who you're talking to and who you're not?
Right. It's hard because we don't have a lot of resources, so we don't have a lot of time. But it really comes down to managing your time in that regard. I mean, I get a lot of phone calls, I get a lot of emails, just blindly people reaching out to me. And a lot of times, it may be something that they're selling that I don't have a need for right now. So I may have to tell them, look, I don't have a need right now. I don't have a desire to learn anymore. I got a pretty good idea of your product. So why don't you call me back in 6 months or a year? And they'll mark their calendar and they'll follow up with me. Or if I have a little bit more of an interest, I may say, do you have any events coming up, or do you have a short webinar that you can do with me for 20 minutes and give me a little more highlights over your product? And tell me maybe some of your customers that you're using that have experience with the product. some of my peers that I can reach out to and say, how has this been beneficial to you?
Can you give me an example where a vendor has been useful to you and they've helped you solve a problem?
Sure. I can remember when I first started working with my current employer about 4 or 5 years ago, that there was really no fraud protection on the e-commerce site. Someone was manually looking at orders and trying to decipher what was fraud and what was a good order. And as well as catching orders that were probably fraud, I had some fear that they were probably cutting off some good orders too, because they were fearful of releasing an order and having it come up bad. So I had worked with a couple different vendors, looking at their products, and since then, we decided and launched a product which has been very successful to us and has certainly paid for itself a number of times over. But now they're also having user groups where they're pulling people together on a regional basis. Might be an event in New England or an event in the Mid-Atlantic, an event in the Midwest, and getting people together. And I'll tell you, it's not only within the typical retail verticals that you might think about, such as an apparel store, a home appliance store, or a furniture store, but it's also people selling things online, such as ticket organizations. There's Ticketmaster, StubHub, and some of the others out there, to airline organizations that are selling tickets online. And getting those people, you would never get those people together, I don't think, in any other arena. So you have this airline person that's responsible for screening e-commerce orders, as well as maybe an apparel department store, as well as a ticket agency, and what you can learn from them that you may not learn just on your own until you're exposed to it, i.e., exposed by getting hit with the fraud.
So it sounds to me that you find most people in your network through associations, um, conferences, local networking events that may or may not even be tied to exactly what you do. You're just always on the lookout to meet that person that may be able to help you learn something new. Is that correct?
Yes, an example of that, Scott, would be there's a human resource organization that's national, and I get emails from the local chapter here in Connecticut, and I'll often briefly look at them and delete them because they don't have any direct correlation to my needs or what I'm doing. But on occasion, they may have someone that's coming in and talking about the legal aspects of interviewing employees. And although it's a human resource uh, group, I can still go over and possibly pick up some more knowledge from that organization.
Well, we're nearing an end of time, and you've told us how to find these people and the importance of finding these people. I think I want to bounce and maybe finish on this question. We in the security industry are very busy. It just tends to go with our job, our role. Most departments are under resourced, so we are always managing our time and priorities. Often, when we're busy, we're too busy to do the right things, such as connect with others who may actually make us better off. In your opinion, how much time should be allotted in a given month, a given week? You can select the time frame, but how much time do you think should be given to networking and connection with your peers?
Good question. And I don't think I can tell you, it's a couple hours a week or a month or, over the course of a couple months. But on average, I would say you need to carve out a couple hours each month and pick up the phone and reach out to someone or find an event and go to that event, or scroll through LinkedIn and find someone like I was able to find Mike, and just reach out to that person. I guess a couple hours, 2 hours a month. One of the things that I do when I find that I'm falling behind and not doing that as well is sometimes I'll project, okay, 3 weeks from now on that Friday from 1 to 3 in the afternoon, things hopefully will slow down a little bit. I'm going to spend an hour or two. I might reach out to a current colleague. Maybe they have reached out and obtained some new people in their network, or I may just reach out to other people within organizations that I belong to or think I have an interest to. There's a number of organizations today that I think have really helped develop the industry. As is International has been out there for a number of years, but more specific to loss prevention, there's certainly NRF, the National Retail Federation, has a loss prevention group, as well as the Loss Prevention Foundation, which is more educational based, but still a great resource for networking. And with so much happening with e-commerce fraud today and identity theft, which a lot of retailers are faced with today, I have found that the group called the International Association of Financial Crime Investigators is a great resource as well. It's mostly bankers and law enforcement and postal service inspectors that handle the law enforcement side of the post office. And who would ever think that I'd be sitting in a room with a bunch of bankers that back in the day were chasing checks and credit card issues, but now the fraud has progressed into my arena as well.
The world has drastically changed. All right, I promise this is the final question of the day. NRF is coming up shortly, and I know that you try to make a showing at most of these major conferences. My experience with most of these conferences is, again, there is a lot going on. You have options of educational formats, you have some networking events, you have show floor time, learning about different technologies, many things pulling at your attention. How does Patrick successfully manage a big show like this?
Well, I can tell you the last time we went to NRF Protect was last year, and I attended not only the expo, but the general sessions as well. And then I had some events with dinners and other events with vendors that were sponsors of events after the regular day. This year, my approach is a little bit different. I'm actually bringing 2 or 3 people with me, having someone attend the sessions and taking notes and gaining that valuable experience. And then myself and another individual will split up and visit the vendors, not only the ones that we currently do business with, to thank them for their partnership, but also new things that we're interested in learning about, possibly applications that we're thinking about in the future, and then also just the opportunity to speak with someone blindly at one of the booths or some of our other peers as some of the challenges they're having and things that we could be looking at.
Now, just as general trivia, one thing I never told you is how Mike and I met. It was an ASIS conference. We were in a shuttle van taking probably 7 to 10 people from the airport to the hotels, and it was a chance meeting between 2 guys that just happened to be sitting next to each other on a van. And now 4 or 5 years later, good friends, do work together, and do anything we can to help the other guy out. And that is what
Right.
networking is all about in my mind.
Right. And I've recently had a similar experience where I went to the Secure Stores Forum in Florida, and that is sponsored by a group of vendors that bring in about 30 to 40 loss prevention executives and give presentations throughout the day. And there's generally about 20 to 25 vendors, and they're getting about 20 minutes to present their wares to us. But what was funny about that event is I had recently hired a regional to cover our Chicago market because we were opening a number of stores and growing. And great individual, great job recruiting on our recruitment department's half, and just a real sharp individual, and has really been doing well for us out there. And he was very happy at his previous company, but they were struggling financially, and he didn't see a long-term career there. So when I arrived, I get on the shuttle bus and I introduce myself to the person sitting next to me, who happens to be his former boss.
Oh, wow.
And we only got to know that as we started talking about who we're with and what we do. And next thing I know, he turns to me and says, I'm just going to use, how's John Doe doing? But he wasn't upset that he joined. He spoke highly of the individual, and professionally understood why he made the move.
If you're newer to this industry, there is one last piece of advice I'm going to give. Although this is a very large industry, it is a very small industry. Mind yourself well when you choose to depart or go to another organization. Do not burn those bridges, because we all know each other, we all talk, and it's just good business practice, personal business practice, to ensure that you maintain the highest standards with how you act and interact with your employers and former employers.
Correct.
Well, Patrick, unfortunately, our time has run out. I appreciate you taking your time today and just sharing some insights on networking, personal networking to all of us. If any of you listeners are out and about at NRF, be looking for that name badge, Patrick Burns. He'll be happy to stop, shake your hand, and have a little conversation. Patrick, if they're not going to be at NRF and they would like to connect with you, is there a way they might be able to do so?
Sure. They can find me on LinkedIn very easily under J. Patrick Burns. That's J period for the first initial, Patrick Burns, Burns. Or they can reach out to me via email at patrick.burns, Burns, at mybobs, mybobs.com.
Patrick, I appreciate that, and I always ask all the listeners to ensure that they mention Security Pro Insights in either the subject line of your email or within the LinkedIn connection. That way Patrick knows where this person is coming from. With that, I thank you for your time today, and we very much appreciate all your insights.
It's a pleasure, Scott, and thank you for doing this for the industry. It matters.